Unaware his pregnant wife was the secret billionaire CEO of the bank that employed him, Daniel Porter stormed out of their tiny apartment with divorce papers in one hand and his mistress's perfume still clinging to his shirt. But the woman he dismissed as weak, broke, and ordinary was quietly running the billion-dollar financial empire that controlled every paycheck he'd ever earned. Madison Porter, 8 months pregnant and fighting through the ache in her back, watched her husband walk away without a glance, never knowing that the man she loved had traded their marriage for a mistress who mocked her swollen belly, called her a liability, and promised Daniel a future far above his poor, pregnant wife. Daniel thought divorcing his pregnant wife for his mistress was a step into a glamorous new life, but he had no idea the same pregnant wife he abandoned was the hidden billionaire CEO of the very bank he worked for, the secret woman behind the glass tower he bragged about every night. He believed he was walking toward money, power, and prestige, but Madison had already signed documents capable of rewriting his destiny, reshaping the bank that employed him, and exposing the lies he built his new life on. So what did his pregnant billionaire CEO wife do after he divorced her for his mistress? What move did she make that shocked him, the bank, and the entire city? And why did Daniel realize too late that the woman he discarded was the only one who ever had the power to save or destroy his future? The morning Daniel Porter decided to end his marriage, the sky over Brookside City was a muted gray, the kind of color that made everything feel fragile. Madison Porter stood in their small kitchen, her hand resting on her belly as their unborn son shifted beneath her ribs. She whispered something soft to him, something a mother says when she knows she's all her child has left. The kettle hissed on the stove, but her thoughts were miles away, drifting toward the building she secretly owned, the place where her husband would walk into that morning, bragging to his co-workers that he would run the bank one day. He never knew he already slept beside the woman who did. Madison reached for her tea, wincing as a sharp pain shot across her stomach. Pregnancy had not been easy for her. Her doctors had warned her that the stress she carried wasn't good for the baby, but stress seemed to be sewn into her life. Daniel had once held her hand through appointments, rubbed her feet at night, kissed her stomach, and whispered promises of a better future. But somewhere between promotions he didn't get and compliments he didn't receive, he started looking at her the way a man looks at a life that was holding him back. A soft knock snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned, expecting Daniel to walk in with that forced smile he wore whenever he came home late. Instead, the door swung open sharply and Daniel entered with a cold look she hadn't seen before, one that made her heart sink before he even spoke. "We need to talk," he said, tossing a white envelope onto the kitchen table. A manila envelope would have hurt, but this plain white one cut deeper because it was so emotionless. Madison stared at it, her heart beat heavy. "Daniel, what is this?" He didn't soften. He didn't blink. "It's over, Maddie. I'm filing for divorce." The room suddenly felt too small. She steadied herself on the table. "Divorce? Daniel, we're having a baby." "Your pregnancy doesn't change anything," he replied, shrugging off his coat with impatience. "I can't keep living like this. I deserve more than this cramped apartment and your endless doctor visits." She swallowed. "You said we'd get through this together." "That was before I realized what I want in life," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Madison, I can't stay with someone who's holding me back." The words stung, but the quiet way he said them hurt more. She looked up at him, really looked, and that was when she noticed something, a faint scent of vanilla and jasmine clinging to him. Not hers, not anything she owned, the expensive kind that told stories. "Daniel," her voice trembled, "is there someone else?" He hesitated for one devastating second, then nodded, her chest tightened. "Who? It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "You're my husband." Daniel exhaled impatiently. "It's Amber." Madison felt her heart collapse inward. Amber Price, the tall, stunning woman from Daniel's department, the one who giggled too loudly at his jokes, the one who wore red lipstick every day because she liked the attention, the one Daniel always insisted was just friendly. Amber, of course, A pulse of pain rolled through Madison's lower stomach. But she didn't wince. She wouldn't let him see her crack. "So you're leaving your pregnant wife? For her?" she asked quietly. "For someone who sees my potential," he shot back. "Someone who believes I deserve more than being stuck behind a desk while you nag me about money we don't have." Madison didn't nag. She just hid the fact that she had billions. "Daniel," she breathed, gripping the chair, "you're making a mistake." He laughed bitterly. "The only mistake I made was staying this long." She took that blow silently. 3 years of marriage reduced to this. A toss of a white envelope. A woman who smelled like jasmine. A man she thought she knew walking farther away with every word. "Amber and we're good together," he continued as though she'd asked. "She's ambitious. She wants the lifestyle I want." "And I don't?" Madison whispered. "You can't give it," he replied coldly. For a moment, Madison felt her composure fracture, but she inhaled slowly. Strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet decision to stay standing when everything inside wanted to fall. She pressed a hand to her belly, breathing through the ache. "Daniel, I love you. We're a family." "Not anymore," he said, grabbing his phone and sliding it into his pocket. "Amber and I are serious, and she said she won't wait forever." There it was, the truth. He didn't come to talk. He came to leave. He turned toward the door without another word, and something inside Madison shifted. She wasn't just a pregnant wife abandoned by her husband. She wasn't just the woman he called ordinary. She was the billionaire CEO of Brookside Federal Bank. She had power Daniel couldn't imagine. She had control over his job, his paycheck, his reputation. She had signatures waiting on her desk, documents that would change the bank forever, and Daniel had no idea. As he walked out and the door clicked shut behind him, Madison whispered softly to her unborn son, "He doesn't know who he just walked away from." She tilted her head up, her eyes burning but dry. He would, very soon. The sound of the door closing behind Daniel echoed in Madison's chest long after he was gone. She stood frozen in the kitchen, one hand on her belly, the other resting against the cold surface of the table where the divorce envelope lay like a cruel insult. Outside, the city began to wake, cars humming, horns blaring, voices rising. But inside their apartment, everything felt painfully still. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look. She already knew who it was. Her assistant had been calling since sunrise. Brookside Federal Bank needed her. She moved toward the small mirror beside the hallway shelf. Her reflection startled her. Puffy eyes, pale skin, hair that had lost its shine from weeks of stress. A maternity dress that hung loose where it used to fit beautifully. She looked like the fragile woman Daniel claimed she'd become. But beneath that exhaustion was steel. She straightened slowly, lifting her chin the way her father used to tell her when she was a child. "Never show the world your tears," he'd say. "Show them your mind." A sharp memory swept through her. 10-year-old Madison in her father's office, spinning in his leather chair while he reviewed documents. She'd asked him once what those papers meant. He'd smiled and said, "These papers decide futures." She didn't know then that one day she'd sit in that same chair deciding futures of her own, including the future of the man who had just walked out on her. Madison took a slow breath and turned toward the bedroom. She changed into a soft blue blouse and black maternity slacks, comfortable but polished. She applied light makeup just to look less drained. At the door, she slipped on her low heels, steadying herself as the baby kicked gently, as if encouraging her. "I'm okay," she whispered. She locked the apartment behind her. Her driver, Mason Lewis, stood by the black SUV parked in the building's driveway. A tall, calm man in his early 40s. He rushed forward the moment he saw her. "Ma'am, are you all right? You weren't answering your phone." She forced a calm smile. "Rough morning. Let's head to the bank." Mason opened the door for her with a respectful nod. "Of course." As she settled into the back seat, her hand found her belly again. She felt the baby's movements. Life, hope, strength she didn't know she had. The vehicle eased into traffic. Buildings blurred past. Shops, cafes, offices, ordinary places hiding extraordinary secrets. People crossing the streets had no idea that inside the SUV sat a woman who controlled one of the largest banks in the state. A woman whose own husband believed she was worth leaving for a coworker with brighter lipstick. Madison closed her eyes briefly. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. "Good morning, Evelyn," she said. Her assistant exhaled sharply with relief. "Madison, thank God. The board is already gathering for the 10 a.m. strategy session, and Mr. Hawthorne is furious that the restructuring documents haven't been signed." Madison pressed her forehead gently against the seat. "Tell him I'll handle it." "And there's—" Evelyn paused, her voice lowering. "There's something else." Madison opened her eyes. "What?" "It's Daniel. He submitted a transfer request this morning. He's asked to be moved to the Executive Advancement Program." "Of course he did. The same morning he handed her divorce papers. He was running toward Amber, toward a future he thought was brighter, toward a life he believed his pregnant wife could never give him." Madison's lips tightened. "Noted. Anything else?" "Yes. Mr. Hawthorne said the decision on the new senior vice president must be made today. The candidates are waiting." Madison inhaled. That decision was already made. She had spent months analyzing reports, evaluating performances, reading through the kind of details most CEOs never bothered with. And Daniel was one of the candidates. He always bragged about it, always talked about moving up soon, always said he'd give Madison and the baby the life they deserved, even though she was the one who provided that life all along. But Daniel didn't know that the final signature, her signature, would determine who earned that promotion. "All right," she said calmly. "I'll decide when I'm in." The SUV slowed in front of Brookside Federal Bank's headquarters, a 32-story glass tower reflecting the morning sun. People entered and exited the spinning doors in a rush. Executives in suits, interns scrambling with coffee trays, security guards scanning badges, and Daniel. Through the tinted window, Madison saw him. He was standing at the entrance with Amber, her bright red dress a sharp contrast against the silver building. Amber laughed, tossing her long wavy hair. Daniel leaned closer, placing a hand on her waist, a hand that had touched Madison just hours ago. Madison's breath caught, but she forced herself to stay composed. Amber lifted her phone and snapped a selfie of them. Daniel smiled like a man who had finally found everything he ever wanted. But then something happened. Amber's expression shifted. Her smile faltered. She looked past Daniel, straight toward the SUV, as if she sensed someone watching. The vehicle's tinted windows hid Madison, but Amber stepped back, confusion flickering on her face. Daniel turned to look too. Madison remained still, heart pounding but eyes cold. Mason glanced at her through the mirror. "Ma'am, should I move?" Madison held her gaze on Daniel, who was still squinting at the SUV, trying to see inside. "No," she whispered. "Let him look." She watched him for a few more seconds, then exhaled slowly. "Let's go," she said. The vehicle pulled forward, leaving Daniel and Amber behind. As they drove into the underground parking, a strange calm washed over her. Today would be the day everything changed. For her, for the bank, for her unborn child, and for Daniel Porter, the man who had no idea what storm he had just awakened. The elevator ride to the top floor felt heavier than usual. Madison stood between two senior analysts who were too intimidated to speak to her, even though they pretended not to recognize her outside of board meetings. Everyone at Brookside Federal Bank respected the CEO, but very few knew how to read the quiet woman who held the city's financial veins in her hands. Mason had offered to escort her inside, but she declined. Today she needed to move on her own feet. Today she needed to walk into that boardroom like the woman Daniel never believed she could be. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The executive floor greeted her with polished marble floors, glass walls, and the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting from the reception area. Evelyn, her assistant, rushed toward her, carrying a tablet and a stack of documents. "Madison, thank God you're here," she said breathlessly. "The board members are already in the conference room waiting for you. Mr. Hawthorne is in one of his moods." Of course he was. Samuel Hawthorne, the bank's senior board director, had spent the last 2 months challenging every decision Madison made. He didn't like young CEOs. He especially didn't like young female CEOs. And he hated that she had inherited the bank rather than clawing her way through the ranks the way he had. But inheritance didn't mean incompetence. Madison had proved that 1,000 times over. She took the documents from Evelyn, flipping through them quickly as she walked. Are the restructuring contracts ready? Yes, they just need your signature. Her signature. The one thing Daniel hadn't given any meaning to. The one thing he dismissed as paperwork. Those contracts would reshape the bank's leadership structure. They would also affect Daniel's department and the executive advancement program. Good, Madison said softly. Anything else? Evelyn hesitated. Mr. Hawthorne requested to speak with you privately before the meeting. Madison stopped walking. Did he say why? No, Evelyn said, lowering her voice. But he looked heated. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. He's still against the expansion proposal, isn't he? Yes, of course he was. Hawthorne fought every innovation she proposed, claiming the bank was fine as is, just as Daniel had always done in their marriage, resisting growth, rejecting change, clinging to comfort. But she wasn't built to stay small. She began walking again, her steps controlled, her breath steady. As she approached her office, she noticed someone standing outside the door. A woman, thin, tall, and dressed in a fitted gray skirt and blazer. Dark curls pinned neatly, professional makeup, the expression of someone trying to appear confident. Amber. Madison froze for a fraction of a second. Amber turned sharply when she heard the footsteps. The moment she recognized Madison, her expression faltered. Her confidence dropped, replaced by something unsure, something almost nervous. Mrs. Porter, Amber said, trying to sound composed. I didn't expect to see you here this early. Madison nodded once. I work here. Amber's cheeks flushed. Right. I mean, of course. Evelyn stiffened beside Madison, her eyes narrowing. Madison stepped closer. Is there something you need? Amber swallowed. Actually, yes. I wanted to discuss Daniel's transfer request. There it was, the nerve of her, standing outside the CEO's office, asking for influence. The same woman who mocked Madison's pregnancy, the same woman who convinced Daniel he deserved more. Madison didn't let her expression change. Daniel's request will be reviewed, along with the others. Amber shifted uncomfortably. Right. It's just, he's really excited about the program. He deserves the chance. Does he? Does the man who left his pregnant wife for his mistress deserve advancement? Madison remained still. Every candidate will be evaluated fairly. Amber forced a smile. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, that he isn't overlooked. Before Madison could respond, the door to her office swung open. Samuel Hawthorne stepped out, his expression darkening the second he saw Amber. Employees are not allowed on the executive floor without authorization, he snapped. Amber flinched. Madison turned to her, her voice polite but firm. You should go, Amber. You're not supposed to be here without clearance. Amber nodded quickly. Yes, sorry, She hurried down the hallway, heels clicking too loudly. Hawthorne watched her leave with thinly veiled disgust. He turned to Madison. Your husband's mistress, I assume? Madison inhaled slowly. She is an employee. Hawthorne scoffed. An employee who now believes she has influence. This is why we must be careful who we allow into leadership tracks. Madison stepped past him into her office. Let's talk inside. Hawthorne followed, closing the door behind them. Madison moved to her desk, lowering herself carefully into her chair. Her back ached, but she ignored it. She had no time for weakness. Hawthorne remained standing. We need to reconsider today's restructuring vote. No, Madison replied calmly. Hawthorne's jaw clenched. You're pushing too fast, too hard. This bank has a rhythm. And that rhythm is outdated, she said. He slammed his palm on her desk, startling her. You inherited this position. You didn't earn it. There it was, the truth he was too proud to hide. Madison folded her hands. Would you like to review the growth projections again? He glared at her. Or the stabilization reports, she continued. Or perhaps the quarterly profits, which have risen 26% since I took over? Hawthorne stepped back slightly, but Madison wasn't done. And those restructuring documents you hate so much, she said, They are the only reason this bank isn't drowning under your outdated systems? He swallowed hard but said nothing. Madison opened the folder on her desk, picked up the pen, and signed her name with slow, deliberate strokes. Hawthorne stiffened. "You're making a mistake." She looked up. "No," she said softly. "I'm making a future." She capped the pen. "And some people," she added, her voice tightening with quiet power, "won't be part of it." The boardroom was already packed when Madison walked in. 12 board members seated around the long glass table, each one turning as if drawn by an invisible force the moment she entered. The room went silent, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning and the tapping of Hawthorne's impatient fingers against his chair. Madison stepped through the doorway with a quiet authority, her steps measured, her breath steady. It didn't matter that her heart still carried the sting of Daniel's betrayal. In this room, feelings didn't rule. Power did. Evelyn took her place near the wall, tablet in hand. Hawthorne sat in his usual seat near the center, glaring at her like a man bracing for a storm he no longer controlled. Madison lowered herself into the CEO's chair at the head of the table. She felt the cool leather cradle her back, and for a brief moment, she remembered another woman sitting in this seat, her mother, Catherine Porter, a name spoken with reverence in every corner of the banking world. Madison hadn't just inherited a bank. She had inherited a legacy. Her mother's voice whispered through her memory, "Never let a room dictate your worth, Madison. Walk in knowing you belong there." She lifted her chin. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but commanding. A few murmured greetings followed. Hawthorne cleared his throat loudly, as if trying to reclaim the attention. "We've been waiting," he said pointedly. "And now we can begin," Madison replied. Evelyn handed her a stack of documents. Madison placed them neatly on the table. "We're here to finalize the restructuring proposal," she began. "As you all know, these changes are designed to stabilize operations, modernize internal systems, and strengthen leadership accountability." Hawthorne scoffed under his breath. "By strengthen, you mean replace." Madison didn't flinch. "By strengthen, I mean improve." A few board members exchanged glances. Some of them supported her vision, others resisted change. But all of them knew she wasn't someone who backed down from challenges. Madison tapped the first page. "The new structure will streamline oversight, reduce department redundancies, and allow for better evaluation of executive performance." Hawthorne leaned forward. "You want to replace department heads?" "Only the ones failing their performance metrics," she said. "And who defines those metrics?" "I do," she answered simply. The room went still. Madison continued flipping through the pages. She felt a slight kick from her baby, a reminder that she wasn't carrying this fight alone. He was with her reason, her strength. As she spoke, her mind drifted briefly into a memory. Years ago, when she was newly married to Daniel, she had shown him her first restructuring model on a sheet of notebook paper. She was so excited, so proud. Daniel barely looked at it. "Babe, banking stuff isn't my thing," he had said, shrugging. "Talk to me when it's something fun." She had laughed back then, brushing off the sting. She didn't laugh now. She turned another page. "These changes will go into effect immediately after board approval," she said. Hawthorne abruptly stood, palms flat on the table. "This is reckless. You're pushing too hard, too fast. Leadership doesn't come from signing documents, Madison." She looked up slowly. "Leadership comes from growth, and this bank is growing." He jabbed a finger toward her. "You're young, emotional, overextended. Perhaps your personal situation is clouding your judgment." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew what he was referring to: her pregnancy, her husband leaving her, the gossip that had already begun spreading through the office halls. Madison's jaw tightened. Evelyn sucked in a breath. But Madison didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam anything. She simply folded her hands and stared at Hawthorne long enough for him to feel the weight of his own words. "My personal life does not interfere with my leadership," she said calmly. "And it never has." Hawthorne sneered. "We disagree." "You're entitled to your opinion," she replied, "but the numbers don't lie. This bank is stronger than ever." "And you think you're the reason for that?" he challenged. "I know I am." A wave of murmurs washed around the table. Hawthorne's face reddened. He grabbed his folder and slammed it shut. This restructuring vote is premature, irresponsible, and one of the older board members lifted a hand. Samuel, sit down. Hawthorne froze. Let the CEO finish, the man added, his tone firm. Slowly, Hawthorne sat. Madison continued. If anyone has concerns about the proposal's effectiveness, we can discuss them individually. But the projections are clear. This plan works. She picked up her pen. And as CEO, I am recommending immediate adoption. Hawthorne's eyes widened. You cannot push this through without a vote. I'm not. She slid the signed restructuring contract into the center of the table. I'm approving it. The silence was deafening. You inherited authority, Hawthorne said bitterly. Not wisdom. Madison leaned back in her chair. Her voice remained controlled, but her eyes sharpened with a clarity he couldn't ignore. I inherited leadership, she said. Wisdom I earned. A ripple of reactions moved down the table. Then the door opened. Everyone turned. Daniel stepped inside, uninvited, breathless, holding a folder as if it were a lifeline. Madison's heart stopped. He looked around the room, stunned by the sight of her at the head of the table, commanding a space he didn't even know she belonged to. Madison? He whispered, confusion and fear bleeding into his voice. A dozen heads turned back to her. Madison's breath steadied. Her baby kicked gently. Her power rose like a tide inside her chest. Daniel had just walked into the wrong room, at the wrong moment, on the wrong day. His shock was only beginning. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel stood in the doorway like a man who had stumbled into a reality he was never meant to see. The silence hit him first, then the eyes, 12 board members staring at him, Evelyn frozen by the wall, Hawthorne glaring with disbelief, and Madison seated at the head of the table with the calm authority of someone who owned every inch of the room. Daniel blinked rapidly, confusion twisting across his face. Madison, he stammered. What are you doing here? Madison didn't answer immediately. She let him drown in the question, let him realize there was something here he didn't understand, something far beyond the small world he thought he controlled. Hawthorne broke the silence. This is a closed meeting. Employees don't simply walk in. Get out. Daniel flinched at the harshness. I'm sorry, he said, shifting awkwardly. I was looking for the executive advancement briefing. My supervisor said it was... He stopped mid-sentence when his eyes landed on the restructuring contracts in front of Madison, with her signature on them. His face paled. Madison finally spoke. Daniel, she said, her voice even, steady. You need to leave. This floor is restricted. He stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman before him. She looked different here, stronger, colder, impossible to ignore. Restricted? He echoed softly. Since when are you allowed on this floor? A few board members exchanged glances. Hawthorne let out a sharp laugh. Allowed? Porter, are you dense? She runs this floor. Daniel blinked, his confusion deepening. What? Madison inhaled slowly, her fingers resting gently on her belly, grounding herself. Daniel, leave the room. He didn't move. He couldn't. His gaze jumped from her seat to the documents, to the stunned expressions around the table, as if the truth were punching him from every angle. Hawthorne stood abruptly. Security will escort him. No, Madison said calmly. Hawthorne stopped. Everyone looked at her. Daniel stared, chest rising and falling too quickly. Madison, he whispered, voice cracking. What's going on? Madison gestured toward the hallway. Please wait outside. I'll speak with you when the meeting is over. Her tone was not emotional, not shaky, not the voice of the woman he left crying in a kitchen that morning. This was the voice of a CEO issuing a directive. Daniel tried to force a grin, the same grin he used whenever he didn't understand something. Is this a joke? Some kind of... It is not a joke, Madison said softly. Her calmness terrified him more than anger would have. Mr. Porter, came a voice from the opposite end of the table. A board member named Eleanor Gray, elegant and sharp-eyed, who had admired Madison's leadership from the day she stepped in. Your wife is the chief executive officer of this bank. Daniel's head snapped toward her. CEO? His mouth fell open. No, that's impossible. Hawthorne rolled his eyes. Impossible for you to know, perhaps, but true. Daniel's gaze darted back to Madison. Madison, you own this bank? Madison didn't move. Please step outside. But Daniel stepped forward, desperation creeping into his voice. Madison, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Why? Her voice hardened. Outside, Daniel. The last word hit him like a slammed door. His shoulders slumped. His eyes dropped to the floor. And for the first time since he walked in, he realized this room wasn't his. This world wasn't his. The power he craved, the prestige he chased, the future he thought he deserved, belonged to the woman he had left that morning. Daniel slowly backed away, bumping into the door as he exited. The door shut quietly behind him. The room stayed silent for several seconds. Hawthorne let out a disgusted grunt. Employees have become far too entitled. Madison exhaled, steady but tired. Let's continue. But half the board wasn't looking at the documents anymore. They were looking at her, really looking, many for the first time. They saw not just a CEO, not just a young woman, not just an heiress. They saw a leader who sat through humiliation, heartbreak, and betrayal, and still carried the room with controlled grace. Madison cleared her throat. The restructuring plan is in motion. We need to finalize department reassignments today. Eleanor spoke gently. Do you want a moment, dear? Madison shook her head. No, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her chest felt tight. Her baby shifted restlessly inside her, picking up her stress. But she kept her posture straight, her expression calm, her authority intact. Because weakness was a luxury she wasn't allowed in this room or in her life. Hawthorne tapped his pen irritably. Are we done with all the theatrics? Madison turned her eyes on him, cold, controlled, unyielding. Yeah, she said, we're done. And with a level voice that sliced the air like glass, she added, next on the agenda is leadership eligibility. A few members stiffened. Madison continued. Several candidates applied for the Executive Advancement Program, including employees from Daniel's department. Hawthorne scoffed. No doubt your husband expects favoritism. Yes, Madison said without hesitation. He does. The room quieted. She held their gaze. But he will not receive it. The board members nodded, some in approval, some in shock. Hawthorne smirked. Good. Favoritism is poison. Madison's next words chilled the room. And since the restructuring places me in direct oversight of all executive promotions, I will personally assess every candidate, including Daniel Porter. A few murmurs rippled around the room. Hawthorne leaned back, satisfied. Excellent. Saves us trouble. But Madison wasn't done. She tapped the signed restructuring documents. Under the new structure, candidates with disciplinary issues or inappropriate workplace conduct are automatically disqualified. Evelyn glanced up slowly, eyes widening. Hawthorne raised a brow. And does your husband have such issues? Madison met his stare without blinking. He will. Nobody spoke. Madison lifted her pen again. And just like that, the fate of Daniel Porter, who waited trembling outside the door, shifted with one quiet decision from the wife he abandoned. The moment Madison adjourned the meeting, the board members rose from their seats, murmuring among themselves as they gathered their documents. Some offered respectful nods, others kept their distance, but all of them stole quick glances toward the door, as if they could still feel Daniel's confusion lingering on the other side. Madison stood slowly, her lower back aching from sitting too long. Evelyn rushed forward, placing a supportive hand near her elbow. Take your time, Evelyn whispered. Don't push yourself. Madison mustered a small nod, though her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had just publicly asserted her authority in the biggest way since inheriting the bank, and yet all she could feel was the weight of Daniel's shocked stare, the confusion in his breathing, the tremor in his voice. Her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, had walked into a world he never knew she lived in. Evelyn gathered Madison's laptop and papers. Do you want me to walk you to your office? No, Madison said. I need to Handle something. Evelyn understood immediately. She stepped aside. The hallway outside the boardroom was quiet except for the soft hum of the building's ventilation. And there he was, Daniel, leaning against the wall, chest rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. His folder hung loosely from his hand. His tie was crooked. His eyes were red, though whether from shock or embarrassment, Madison couldn't tell. When he saw her, he straightened quickly. "Madison, please." She didn't stop walking, didn't rush to him, and for the first time in years, he was the one scrambling after her. "Madison, wait!" She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "What do you want?" Daniel swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say you were this?" Madison stood still. Her baby shifted gently inside her, reminding her of her purpose, her strength. "I wanted a marriage, Daniel, not a power struggle." He flinched. "I wanted a husband who loved me," she continued quietly. "Not a man who measured my worth by what I could offer him." Daniel stepped closer. "But you could have told me. You could have trusted me with this." Madison felt a bitterness rise in her throat. "Trusted you?" Flashbacks cut through her mind. Daniel laughing with Amber in the hallway at a company party. Daniel snatching her hand away when she reached for him in public. Daniel dismissing her dreams. Daniel calling their life too small. Daniel telling her she was holding him back. He had trusted another woman with promises he never gave Madison. She inhaled slowly. "You gave your trust to Amber." His jaw tightened. Shame flickered across his face. "Amber isn't... It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," she said. "You left your pregnant wife. You handed me divorce papers, and you walked out for her." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I was frustrated. I was angry. I felt like you never understood me." "I understood you more than you ever realized," Madison murmured. "I just didn't know love meant shrinking myself so you could feel bigger." Daniel looked at the floor. Madison pressed on. "You said I was holding you back, but I never held you back, Daniel. I held you up. You climbed the ladder in a bank I owned, earned paychecks I signed, lived in a home I paid for, and still you felt small next to me." He squeezed the folder in his hand. "So everything I worked for was because you worked hard," she interrupted softly. "But the opportunities, the stability, the safety net?" She met his eyes. "That was me." Daniel's expression twisted in disbelief. "All those times I complained about money. You had billions?" Madison nodded once. "And you just let me talk like that?" "I let you be who you were," she said simply, "and who you became." Daniel's breathing grew uneven. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You did anyway." He stepped closer, desperation seeping through his voice. "Madison, please. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. If I had..." Her eyes hardened. "If you had, what? You wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have humiliated me. You wouldn't have thrown our marriage away for a woman whose biggest accomplishment is flattering your ego?" Daniel's face reddened. "That's not fair." Madison tilted her head. "Neither was what you did." He didn't argue. Instead, he whispered, I need you to forgive me." Madison stared at him, her heart tightening, but not because she wanted him back. No, it tightened because the man she once loved was standing before her with regret only after realizing what he lost. "I'm not angry anymore," she said softly. "I'm just done." Daniel blinked rapidly. "Done?" "Yes," she said. "Done saving you. Done fixing you. Done making myself small so you can feel big. Done pretending you're someone you're not." His voice broke. "Madison, I need my wife." She hesitated, her voice quiet but firm. "I need peace." He reached out instinctively. She stepped back. Daniel froze. Madison looked into his eyes she once trusted, eyes she once believed in, and felt the final thread snap between them. "Go home, Daniel," she said. "Not to me, to the life you chose." He swallowed, pain flooding his features. "Is this really it?" Madison placed her hand over her belly. "This is clarity." Daniel's eyes dropped to her stomach. Her pregnancy was no longer a distant consequence. It was a reminder of everything he abandoned. Madison turned away. "Madison," he whispered one last time. She didn't look back. She walked down the hallway toward her office, the weight of her child grounding her, the echo of her heels a quiet anthem of power. And Daniel Porter stood alone in the empty hallway, for the first time truly aware of the storm he had created, and the empire he had never known his wife ruled. Madison's office always felt too quiet after a board meeting, too spacious, too polished, too cold. But today the silence felt purposeful, like a cocoon around her. Sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, casting soft gold across the marble floor. The child inside her shifted again, and she placed a gentle hand over her belly as she moved toward her desk. She lowered onto the chair with a slow exhale, the fatigue of the morning settling into her bones. Her assistant Evelyn stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind her. "Everything all right?" Evelyn asked softly. Madison nodded, though her eyes were tired. "Yes, thank you." Evelyn hesitated. "Do you want me to bring you something? Water? Tea?" "No," Madison whispered. "Just give me a moment." Evelyn respected the request and exited silently. When Madison was alone again, she closed her eyes and let her head fall back. The weight of the baby made her lower stomach tighten. But it wasn't physical discomfort that pressed on her chest. It was the emotional exhaustion of being strong in front of everyone, even when she felt fragile behind closed doors. She let her mind drift. She saw herself 2 years ago, laughing with Daniel in their kitchen as they painted the walls of their new apartment. Her paint-streaked hands, his playfulness, their shared dreams. They talked about children, vacations, careers, everything young couples talked about when life still felt endless. But dreams fade when people change. She saw the night Daniel first came home late from work, with the smell of Amber's perfume faintly lingering on his jacket. He claimed it was nothing, said they worked overtime together, said the scent must have come from the office halls. Madison had believed him then, or maybe she'd forced herself to. She remembered the first time Amber spoke to her at a company luncheon, the smile too bright, the compliments too rehearsed, the glances toward Daniel too frequent. Madison had felt something that day, a whisper of betrayal long before she recognized its voice. She opened her eyes. The phone on her desk buzzed, snapping her from the past. She picked it up and saw the caller ID. Dr. Haynes, her obstetrician. Her breath hitched. "Hello?" "Madison," Dr. Haynes's warm voice filled the line. "Just calling with an update. Your blood pressure levels from last week's test came back elevated. I'd like you to come in for a quick checkup today if possible, especially given the stress you're under." Madison swallowed hard. "I understand. I'll schedule something." "Don't wait too long," Dr. Haynes warned gently. "Stress isn't good for you or the baby." Stress. The word felt too small to hold everything happening in her life. After the call ended, Madison placed the phone down carefully. Her hand trembled for a moment, but she steadied it. She needed to take care of herself, she knew that. But right now she had responsibilities that couldn't wait. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," Madison said. The door opened slowly, and to her shock, her younger brother Ethan stepped inside. He was tall, athletic, dressed in denim and a dark hoodie, so different from the polished executives outside. His presence brought a warmth that the room desperately needed. "Ethan," Madison blinked. "What are you doing here?" He gave her a half smile. "Evelyn called me, said you might need backup today." Madison sighed. "She worries too much." "She worries the right amount," Ethan said, moving closer. "You look tired." "I'm fine," she insisted. He raised an eyebrow. "That's the same tone you used when you broke your wrist in high school and insisted it was just a sprain, and you couldn't even zip your backpack." Madison felt a small laugh escape her, a soft, fragile sound she hadn't heard from herself in days. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, leaning forward. "So," he said gently, "are we going to talk about the fact that Daniel stormed out of your apartment this morning and then showed up downstairs looking like someone hit him with a truck?" Madison lowered her gaze. Ethan continued, "Or the fact that I nearly ran into Amber on the elevator, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost?" Madison finally exhaled. "Daniel found out." Ethan's expression hardened. "That you're the CEO?" "Yes." He let out a slow whistle. "About time." Madison shook her head. "I didn't want him to find out like that." "You didn't want him to find out at all," Ethan countered gently. "And I get it. He didn't love you for who you were. He loved the version of you who stayed small so he could feel big." Madison's eyes glistened. Ethan leaned back. "Madison, he walked away from you, from the baby, from everything you offered him. That's not on you. That's on him." She nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle inside her. "Besides," Ethan added with a small smirk, "you've always been too good for him." Madison laughed again, this time fuller, warmer. "Ethan," he raised a hand. "No, really, I've tolerated that man for your sake for years. But the moment he showed up downstairs looking like someone snatched his soul, I thought, yep." Madison finally stopped letting him skate through life. She smiled, shaking her head. Then her baby kicked again, stronger this time. Ethan's face softened. "How's my little nephew doing?" "Energetic," she whispered. He reached out gently, touching her belly. "He's going to be strong, like his mother." Madison's throat tightened. The office door opened again, and Evelyn stepped inside. "Madison, you have 3 department heads waiting in the conference room for reassignment discussions." Madison straightened slowly. Ethan moved to stand, but she motioned for him to stay. "It's okay," she said. "I can handle it." Ethan frowned. "You sure?" Madison rose to her feet, her back straightened, her shoulders lifted. "Yes," she said quietly, but with a strength Daniel had never recognized. She walked past Ethan, past Evelyn, and into the hallway with the quiet power of a woman who had been broken, but not destroyed. Her storm was still building, and Daniel's reckoning was only beginning. The conference room on the 15th floor wasn't nearly as intimidating as the boardroom upstairs, but today it carried a tension thick enough to taste. 3 department heads sat at the long walnut table. Mr. Gaines from compliance, Mrs. Lattimore from corporate lending, and Mr. Dale from operations. All 3 rose to their feet the moment Madison stepped inside. "Good afternoon," she said with quiet authority, taking her seat at the head of the table. They echoed a greeting and sat again, carefully composed. Each of them knew today's meeting could reshape their futures at the bank in ways they couldn't yet predict. Evelyn stood by the wall, tablet ready. Ethan lingered outside the door, not intruding but staying close, his silent presence grounding Madison in ways she desperately needed. She opened a folder and looked at the first report. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you know, the restructuring plans have been approved, and these changes will significantly impact your departments." Mr. Gaines shifted nervously. Mrs. Lattimore sat rigid and attentive. Mr. Dale tapped his pen softly against the table, a small tick he only exhibited when anxious. "Before we proceed," Madison continued, "I want to make something clear. This restructuring isn't about politics. It's about performance, accountability, and direction." A ripple of tension moved through the room. Madison turned her eyes to Mr. Gaines first. "Your compliance department has had 3 flagged audits in the last year. That's unacceptable." Gaines's throat bobbed. "We were understaffed and—" "I reviewed the staffing records," Madison interjected gently. "You declined additional hires. You also dismissed 2 senior auditors who raised red flags on high-risk accounts." Gaines paled. Madison moved on. "Mrs. Lattimore, your department approved a series of corporate loans with insufficient collateral. That exposed the bank to unnecessary risk." Mrs. Lattimore nodded slowly. "I was aiming to increase profit margins." "At the cost of liability," Madison said. "Profit means nothing if the foundation isn't stable." Finally, she turned to Mr. Dale. "Operations had a data breach 2 months ago." Mr. Dale's eyes fell. "Yes, we addressed the weaknesses. Reactive, not proactive," Madison said. "The breach could have cost us millions." Mr. Dale swallowed hard. The room grew still. Every word Madison spoke was measured, professional, but she felt the drain in her bones. Her baby pressed upward against her ribs, and she shifted slightly to ease the pressure. She didn't want them to see her discomfort, not today, not when so much depended on her strength. She took a breath. I've reviewed all your performances thoroughly, and while none of you are being removed from your positions, each of your departments will undergo immediate structural oversight. The collective exhale felt like a weight released. However, Madison added, you will report directly to me for the next 6 months. Eyes widened. Evelyn typed quickly, documenting every word. This is about rebuilding, Madison continued. Not punishment, but you need guidance and accountability. The department heads nodded in unison. As Madison began reviewing the new protocols, her mind drifted, just for a moment, back to Daniel, back to the hallway, back to his stunned eyes, the way his voice trembled, the way he barely breathed when he learned the truth. She refocused. She needed to finish this. She finished outlining the new policies, then dismissed the department heads. They left with tense but grateful expressions, clearly relieved to still have their positions. When the door closed behind them, Madison sagged back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her like a wave. Evelyn stepped forward. You need a break. Madison shook her head. I'm fine. You're not, a voice said from the doorway. Ethan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Madison didn't argue. She simply lowered her head, pressing 2 fingers to her temple. I don't have time to fall apart. You're not falling apart, Ethan said gently. You're carrying an entire empire while 8 months pregnant, and while dealing with a heartbreak that would destroy most people. Madison exhaled shakily. I wish I could rest. I really do. Then do it, Ethan urged. Let the bank breathe without you for a few hours. I can't, she whispered. There's too much at stake. Ethan crouched beside her chair, looking up at her with quiet determination. Madison, you rebuilt this bank in 2 years. You've carried its legacy, sustained its reputation, doubled its profits, stabilized its leadership, and you did all of that quietly, without recognition, without help, without even using your own name publicly. Her eyes glistened. You are allowed to breathe, Ethan finished. Madison placed a shaking hand over her belly. I wish Daniel had said things like that, she whispered. Ethan straightened. Daniel was a chapter, not the story. A knock sounded at the door. Evelyn peeked in nervously. Madison, I'm so sorry, but Daniel is downstairs, waiting. Madison froze. Ethan's expression hardened. Why? Evelyn swallowed. He asked to speak with you. He wouldn't leave. Madison closed her eyes, her breath trembling. She wasn't ready for this. Not again. Not today. But she also knew Daniel. If he was waiting downstairs, it wasn't for closure. It was because fear had finally caught up to him. Where is he exactly? Madison asked. Evelyn hesitated. In the lobby. He looks bad. Ethan folded his arms. You don't owe him anything. Madison opened her eyes slowly. No, she said softly, but he's still the father of my child. Ethan clenched his jaw but nodded. Madison rose to her feet, her hand supporting her lower back. She took a long, steadying breath. If he wants to talk, she said quietly, I'll give him 5 minutes. Ethan walked behind her as she headed toward the elevator. Her heart beat unevenly. Her baby shifted anxiously. Her mind braced itself for impact. Daniel Porter wanted a conversation, but he wasn't prepared for the woman who was walking downstairs to meet him. The elevator doors slid open to the echoing expanse of the Brookside Federal Bank lobby. Marble floors gleamed beneath the sunlight pouring through 40-foot windows. Executives moved briskly through security checkpoints. Customers chatted near the reception desk. Everything looked normal, calm, orderly, polished, except for Daniel. He sat on one of the leather benches near the glass entrance, elbows on his knees, fingers tangled in his hair. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a day. Eyes red, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, his usually neat hair a complete mess. He kept glancing at the revolving doors as if deciding whether to run or stay. When he saw Madison step out of the elevator, tired, graceful, carrying the weight of their unborn child and an entire bank, he shot to his feet. Madison, he blurted, voice trembling. Ethan positioned himself a step behind her, arms crossed, protective. Daniel noticed and swallowed hard. Madison walked slowly toward him, her heels tapping softly on the marble. She stopped a few feet away. Enough distance to breathe. Enough distance to show he no longer had access to her life the way he once did. "You have 5 minutes," she said quietly. Daniel's eyes glistened. "Madison, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emotion trembled behind his voice, but Madison remained still, calm, controlled. "Say what you need to say," she replied. Daniel took a shaky breath. "I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know you were the CEO. I didn't know you owned the bank. I didn't know any of this. If I had—" She lifted a hand, stopping him. "If you had what? You wouldn't have left me? You wouldn't have cheated? You wouldn't have humiliated me?" Daniel's jaw clenched and tears gathered in his eyes. "Madison, I was stupid. I listened to the wrong person. I thought Amber supported me. I thought she believed in me. But the moment she saw how destroyed I was, how embarrassed, I realized she didn't care at all." Madison inhaled slowly, her voice level. "So now you regret it?" "Yes," he whispered. "God, yes, I regret everything." Madison studied him for a long moment. Daniel shifted, fidgeting under her gaze. For years, she had softened herself to make him comfortable. She had lowered her voice, dimmed her dreams, hidden her brilliance. Not anymore. "Daniel," she said calmly, "you didn't leave me because I wasn't enough. You left because you didn't know who you were without someone applauding you." He winced visibly. "You wanted praise, validation, someone who made you feel like a king even when you weren't willing to earn the crown." "That's not fair," he whispered. "It's the truth," she replied softly. Daniel stepped closer, but Ethan took one step forward, blocking him. Daniel stopped immediately. Madison continued. "You left your pregnant wife, Daniel. You made a choice." Daniel shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I was blinded. I thought Amber and I had something. But today, seeing you in that room, hearing them call you CEO, seeing your signature on those contracts, Madison, I don't even have words." Madison didn't soften. "You don't need words." Daniel wiped his face with trembling hands. "I want to fix things. I want to try again. I want to be there for you, for the baby." The baby kicked, almost as if responding. Madison placed a hand gently on her belly, but her voice remained steady. "You weren't there when we needed you," she said. "You made sure of that." "I know," Daniel choked out, "but I can change. I swear I can. Just give me another chance, please. Madison." She stared at him. The man she had loved, the man she had cried for, the man she hoped would change long before today. But Madison had changed, and she wasn't going back. "You don't get to come running back because the life you wanted fell apart," she said quietly. "You don't get to choose fatherhood now because your ego is shattered. Fatherhood is responsibility, Daniel. Commitment, sacrifice. You walked away from all of that." Daniel shook his head violently. No, I didn't mean to. I was overwhelmed. I didn't realize." Madison stepped closer, her eyes cutting straight through him. "Daniel," she said softly, but with a power that made his breath hitch. "You ended our marriage the moment you chose her over us. But you're my wife," he whispered. Madison shook her head gently. "Not anymore." Daniel's face crumbled. "No," he breathed. "Please, Madison, I can't lose you. I can't lose my family. I can't—" "You already did." The words fell heavy, final. Daniel staggered back a step, the truth hitting him harder than any physical blow. His eyes filled with panic, regret, desperation, as if realizing he had destroyed the only good thing he ever had. Madison turned slightly, placing her hand protectively over her stomach. "Our child will know love, safety, stability. But they won't learn heartbreak from the man who abandoned them." Daniel choked on his breath. "Madison!" She shook her head once. "Goodbye, Daniel." He collapsed onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. Ethan placed a supportive hand on Madison's back, guiding her toward the elevator. As the doors closed behind her, Daniel lifted his head, tears blurring the world. The revolving doors spun in front of him, But he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. For the first time, he understood that his 5 minutes had never been enough. And this time, Madison wasn't opening the door again. Madison didn't say a word on the elevator ride back up. Ethan stood beside her, arms folded, jaw set, watching her carefully. The soft hum of the lift surrounded them, but inside Madison's chest, everything felt loud. Her heartbeat, her baby's movements, the pressure of all she had carried these last months. All she had endured, all she had finally released. When the doors opened, employees scattered the moment they saw her, giving her space, not out of fear, but out of respect. The air was different now. Her truth was no longer silent. Her power was no longer hidden. She wasn't the fragile wife someone walked out on. She was the woman who rebuilt her world from the center of a storm. Back in her office, she eased into her chair. Ethan stayed near the window, giving her room but keeping his eyes on her in that protective way only a brother could. The late afternoon sun washed through the glass, warming the office with amber light. Evelyn entered with a stack of mail and a worried frown. "Madison, are you sure you're okay?" Madison let out a slow breath. "I will be." Evelyn nodded, but concern lingered. She placed the mail on the desk. "Before I forget, the legal team finalized the divorce response. It needs your signature whenever you're ready." Madison's eyes drifted to the envelope. The divorce papers Daniel had slapped onto her table that morning were inside her bag, but the documents Evelyn handed her now were different. They weren't a goodbye Daniel forced. They were a goodbye she chose. "Thank you," Madison said quietly. Evelyn left, closing the door behind her. Silence. Madison reached for the envelope, running her fingers across its surface. She didn't open it. Not yet. She simply held it, steady, firm, no tremor in her hand. Ethan approached her slowly. "How do you feel?" "Tired," she admitted. "But lighter." Ethan nodded. "You did the right thing." "I know," she whispered, but her eyes glistened anyway. Ethan pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "You know what Mom used to say?" Madison smiled faintly. "Which part?" "That you can't control who breaks you, but you can control who gets to repair you." Madison's throat tightened. "I'm not broken," she said quietly. "No," Ethan agreed. "You're rebuilt, stronger." Madison closed her eyes, letting those words settle deep into her chest. When she opened them again, she straightened in her seat and finally tore open the envelope. The paper slid out, clean, crisp, emotionless. No insults, no threats, just legal clarity. She signed her name. The pen didn't shake. Ethan exhaled. "That's it then?" "Yes," Madison said softly. "That's it." She sealed the envelope again, this time with her own signature inside. Her decision, her closure. A soft kick from the baby made her shift. She rested her hand lovingly over her stomach. "Mommy's here," she whispered, "and we're going to be okay." Not a promise, a fact. A knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. This time it wasn't Evelyn. It was Mr. Hawthorne. Ethan stiffened instantly, rising to his feet, but Madison raised a hand gently, stopping him. Hawthorne entered slowly, holding a document in his grip. He didn't look as sharp as he usually did. Something in his posture had softened, like the morning's conflict had unraveled something inside him too. "Mrs. Porter," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Madison nodded. "Of course." He stepped forward, placing a thin folder on her desk. "I reviewed the new restructuring plan again, and I may have been wrong." Ethan blinked in shock. Madison remained calm. "I've been in banking for 40 years, Hawthorne continued, his voice lower. "And I've never seen someone lead with your balance of restraint and courage. You handled today with more dignity than I've shown in years." Madison studied him carefully. "What are you saying, Mr. Hawthorne?" He exhaled deeply. "I'm saying I'd like to work with you, not against you. This bank will be stronger with you at the helm, and I'd like to support your vision moving forward." A pause, then Madison nodded, slow and steady. "Thank you." Hawthorne bowed his head respectfully. "And I'm sorry for what I said about your personal life. It was out of line." "It's forgotten," Madison said gently. He nodded once and left. Ethan let out a low whistle. You just made Samuel Hawthorne humble. Madison smiled softly. No, he humbled himself. Change can come from anyone. Ethan grinned. You're incredible. You know that. She shook her head, but a faint smile lingered. I'm just trying to build a life worth raising my child in. Ethan squeezed her hand. You already have. Outside the window, the sun drifted lower, painting the city in burned golden shadow. People moved like small specks below, some rushing home, some starting work, some just trying to find their place in the world. Madison had found hers. She stood, walked to the window, and placed a hand on her belly again. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes but strong, soft cheeks but determined. A woman carved by hardship but not defined by it. A mother on the brink of a new beginning. Behind her, Ethan gathered her things. Ready to go home? Madison looked over her shoulder. Home. Not the apartment where Daniel had left her. Not the life she thought she needed. But the future she was building now, one decision at a time. Yes, she whispered. Let's go. She turned off the office lights, stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind her. Not with sadness, not with fear, but with strength. A chapter had ended, and the next one, hers alone, had already begun.